One of the most dangerous signs in blood pressure isn't the number people fear. It's the one almost everyone ignores. Today, we're breaking down the real battle between systolic and diastolic pressure, and which one quietly pushes people toward heart attacks, strokes, and cognitive decline without ever causing symptoms. You'll see how each number behaves differently as you age, which one becomes more lethal after 50, and the hidden patterns most people miss even when their readings look normal. But I'm also going to show you the single mistake that makes thousands of adults misread their blood pressure entirely. Stay until the end, because I'll reveal the one measurement trick cardiologists use to detect early arterial damage long before standard home monitors catch it. Missing that alone could cost you years of healthy life. I'm Dr. Eli Morgan, a physician who has spent over 30 years helping older adults decode silent warning signs before they become emergencies. Let's make sense of your numbers clearly and calmly. Understanding the two numbers. Every time you take your blood pressure, two forces appear on the screen. And they don't behave the same way inside your arteries. The top number, systolic pressure, is the force created the moment your heart squeezes blood forward. Think of it as the sharp peak of pressure your vessels must withstand multiple times every minute. The bottom number, diastolic pressure, is the steady tension maintained when your heart relaxes between beats, and it reflects how flexible or stiff your arterial walls have become over time. Here's the part most people never learn. These numbers don't rise for the same reasons. Systolic pressure tends to climb as the large arteries lose elasticity with age, especially after 50. Diastolic pressure, on the other hand, often signals deeper issues in the vessel lining, problems that can appear earlier in life and progress silently. Understanding this split is crucial because which number becomes more dangerous for you depends on your age, your metabolic health, and the current state of your arteries. And in the next section, I'll show exactly why the old assumptions about these numbers are no longer accurate, the old belief, and why it no longer works today. For decades, the medical world believed that the bottom number, diastolic pressure, was the main indicator of danger. Older textbooks warned that a high diastolic reading meant the arteries were under constant strain, and many doctors were trained to treat it as the primary red flag. That belief made sense at the time, because heart attacks used to happen at younger ages, when diastolic problems were more common. But the world looks different now. People live longer, diets have changed, stress levels are higher, and the aging process affects the arteries in new ways. Modern imaging studies show that once you cross your late 40s and early 50s, the large arteries begin to stiffen faster than they used to. And that shift pushes systolic pressure upward more aggressively than diastolic. This is the turning point most adults never hear about. The number doctors feared 40 years ago is not always the same number they worry about today. And in the next section, we'll break down why systolic pressure becomes the stronger predictor of real-world danger as you age. Why systolic pressure becomes more dangerous after 50. Once you reach your 50s, your arteries begin to behave differently. And that's when the top number, systolic pressure, becomes the main threat. As you age, the elastic fibers in your major arteries slowly weaken. Years of everyday pressure, or from stress, inflammation, high glucose, and even simple wear and tear, make these vessels stiffer and less able to cushion each heartbeat. When that cushioning fades, every heartbeat sends a harder, sharper surge of pressure through your arteries. That surge increases the force hitting the brain, the heart, the kidneys, and the delicate vessels that feed the eyes. It's the equivalent of losing shock absorbers in a car. Suddenly every bump, every heartbeat, lands with more damage than before. Several modern cardiovascular studies show that elevated systolic pressure in older adults is strongly linked to faster cognitive decline, higher stroke risk, a greater chance of heart failure, and even reduced mobility. The reason? Stiff arteries don't distribute blood evenly. They force organs to absorb more force than they're designed for. This is why two people with the same reading, say 150/80, do not face the same danger. After 50, that 150 matters far more than most people realize. And in the next section, you'll see why the opposite pattern often appears in younger adults, when diastolic pressure becomes the real warning sign. When diastolic pressure becomes the hidden danger, especially in younger adults. Before middle age, the body handles pressure differently. In your 20s, 30s, and even early 40s, the arteries are still flexible enough to absorb the impact of each heartbeat. That's why the bottom number, diastolic pressure, becomes a more revealing signal in younger adults. When diastolic creeps up, it often means the inner lining of the arteries is becoming irritated or inflamed far earlier than it should. This type of damage usually doesn't come from aging. It comes from lifestyle stressors that build up silently: chronic stress, excessive caffeine, smoking, untreated sleep apnea, insulin resistance, and even long periods of inactivity. In younger adults, these factors cause the artery walls to thicken and narrow. The heart then has to push against more resistance even when it's resting, which is exactly what a rising diastolic number represents. What makes this especially dangerous is that younger people rarely feel symptoms. They assume they're too young for blood pressure issues, so the damage continues quietly for years. Elevated diastolic pressure at a young age has been linked to early vessel stiffening, premature heart strain, and a higher likelihood of developing full hypertension later in life. This is why the dangerous number isn't the same for everyone. In the next section, we'll use a simple visual model to make these patterns impossible to forget. A simple visual model. How each number damages the body differently. To really understand why these numbers behave so differently, imagine your arteries as two types of pathways inside your body. The first pathway handles sudden bursts of force, like a flexible tube that's meant to absorb quick pressure waves. This is where systolic pressure does the damage. When arteries stiffen with age, those pressure waves stop being absorbed and instead ricochet through the brain, the heart, and the kidneys. Over time, this creates tiny injuries you never feel yet gradually weaken organ function. Think of it as thousands of invisible impacts accumulating week after week. The second pathway deals with constant unbroken tension. This is where diastolic pressure creates trouble. If the diastolic number is high, it means the body never gets a moment of relief. The vessel walls stay tight, stressed, and inflamed, similar to keeping your hand clenched all day. That long-term tension thickens the arteries earlier in life and forces the heart to work harder even when you're at rest. When you see these two pathways side by side, the danger becomes clear. Systolic harms through repeated surges, diastolic harms through relentless pressure. And in the next section, we'll answer the question everyone wants clarity on. Which number is truly more dangerous for you? The million-dollar answer. Which number is actually more dangerous? So which number should you fear more? The sharp surge at the top or the steady pressure at the bottom? The honest answer is that both can be dangerous, but not in the same people and not for the same reasons. Most adults over 50 face far more risk from elevated systolic pressure because stiffened arteries can't soften the impact of each heartbeat. That repeated force is what pushes people towards strokes, memory decline, and heart failure more than any other blood pressure pattern. But for adults under 50, the relationship flips. A rising diastolic number is often the earliest sign that the arteries are no longer healthy, even if the systolic looks normal. It's a warning that damage is starting from the inside out, a sign younger people tend to dismiss until the problem accelerates later. Here's the bottom line. The more dangerous number is the one that reflects the current weakness in your arteries. Systolic danger rises with age. Diastolic danger rises early, and neither should ever be ignored. In the next section, we'll address one of the biggest misconceptions. Why lowering your numbers with medication doesn't fully erase the risks already building in your arteries. Why medication helps, but does not reset your risk to zero. Blood pressure medication is one of the most effective tools in modern medicine. It lowers your numbers, protects your heart, and dramatically reduces the chances of a sudden event. But here's the part most people never hear. Bringing your readings back into the normal range does not fully erase the damage your arteries have already experienced. When blood vessels have been exposed to years of elevated pressure, whether systolic surges or diastolic tension, tiny structural changes begin to form inside the arterial walls. They stiffen, they thicken. Their ability to expand and contract weakens. Medication controls the pressure moving through these vessels, but it cannot instantly reverse those structural changes. That's why two people with identical readings on a monitor can have very different long-term risks depending on how long their pressure was elevated. This is also why cardiologists emphasize residual risk, the leftover danger that remains even when the numbers look good. Medications help reduce the load, but your arteries still need time, nutrients, improved blood flow, and healthy habits to heal. And that brings us to the next section. The practical steps that truly support your arteries, steps that boost the effectiveness of any medication and, in some cases, reduce your need for stronger doses in the future. The 4 pillars that actually improve arterial health beyond medication alone. If medication lowers the numbers but doesn't fully repair the arteries, what does? The answer lies in 4 daily habits that change the internal environment of your blood vessels. These habits don't just manage pressure. They actively help the arteries regain flexibility, improve nutrient delivery, and calm the chronic inflammation that drives hypertension in the first place. Pillar 1, restore mineral balance. Most adults get far too much sodium and far too little potassium. Increasing potassium-rich foods, leafy greens, yogurt, avocados, citrus, helps the arteries relax and improves the way the kidneys regulate fluid. Even modest changes here can shift your systolic readings downward. Pillar 2, build vascular strength through movement. Gentle strength training and daily walking increasing nitric oxide production, which widens the vessels and improves blood flow. Just 20 to 30 minutes a day has measurable effects. Pillar 3, repair nightly. 7 to 8 hours of sleep is not a luxury. It's when the blood vessels reset. Poor sleep triggers hormonal changes that stiffen arteries and raise morning readings. Pillar 4, break the stress loop. Simple breathing patterns like 4-4-8 or slow nasal breathing activate the parasympathetic system, lowering both systolic spikes and diastolic tension within minutes. These 4 pillars don't replace medication. They supercharge it. And if you want a simple 1-page guide showing exactly what to do based on your age bracket, that's coming up next. A short real-world example would be when the wrong number nearly led to disaster. Let me give you a quick example that shows exactly why understanding these numbers matters. A few months ago, I met a 62-year-old patient named Mr. Landon. He checked his blood pressure every morning, and his systolic always hovered around 148. Not ideal, but not terrifying to him. What he did focus on was his diastolic, which sat comfortably in the mid-70s. Because that bottom number looked normal, he assumed things were under control. But here's what he didn't realize. His arteries had already begun to stiffen, and every heartbeat was sending a stronger pressure wave toward his brain than his numbers suggested. When he started experiencing lightheaded moments after climbing stairs, he blamed age, not blood pressure. A vascular test later showed reduced arterial elasticity, something his home monitor could never reveal. The moment he shifted his focus to systolic control, adjusting diet, medication timing, and daily activity, his symptoms faded within weeks. His numbers didn't just look better, his arteries functioned better. This is why misreading which number matters can hide years of silent damage. In the next section, I'll pull everything together into a tight recap so you walk away with absolute clarity. The clear takeaways you should never forget. Let's bring everything together so you never feel confused about your blood pressure again. First, both numbers matter, but not equally at every age. After 50, rising systolic pressure becomes the stronger predictor of stroke, memory decline, and heart failure because your arteries naturally lose elasticity. Before 50, diastolic pressure reveals earlier inflammation and vessel stress that can quietly set the stage for long-term hypertension. Second, medication lowers the pressure, but doesn't erase the structural changes caused by years of elevated readings. That's why lifestyle habits, mineral balance, movement, sleep, and stress control remain essential even when the numbers look good. Third, your home monitor doesn't measure arterial stiffness, so never assume normal readings mean zero risk. Pay attention to patterns, trends, and how you feel. And finally, remember, the goal isn't perfect numbers. It's healthier arteries that can protect your brain, heart, and mobility for decades. Your next step? Click the video on the screen now. It walks you through the foods and habits that lower systolic pressure safely and naturally.